Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for October 10th, 2022. It will be a somewhat abbreviated report today as there's just been such a large volume of material coming in that it's been difficult to stay on top of it and condense it for you. But I want to focus today on the economic chaos which is ahead, which has been a major part of the connection to the war danger. That is that the Western governments are being pushed by the banking and financial cartels to disrupt any effort to move away from the present unipolar order. And this is a major impetus behind the war against Russia being conducted by NATO. Now, what's clear is that as the US dollar stays high, as a result of the interest rates that are supposedly fighting inflation, money is fleeing other countries, including not just developing sector countries, but the advanced sector countries coming into the United States. And this is forcing real painful adjustments to countries throughout the world. Now, with the US interest rates supposedly fighting inflation, the data that's expected to be released later this week will show that US inflation is officially running at 8.1% on a year-to-year basis. That is 8.1% higher than a year ago this time. Now, that, as you know, significantly underestimates the real inflation because areas of food costs, of housing costs, have gone through the roof. Gasoline prices, it's much higher than 8%. And the way they parse these figures and present them doesn't give any real indication of how potentially deadly this inflation is for families. Now, the latest line on inflation is that it was the 2021 stimulus checks, the 2020 and 2021 stimulus checks, which is causing inflation. Now, somehow people who are pushing this line are ignoring the fact that the total amount of the stimulus checks, the stimulus payments, were $6 trillion, of which $2 trillion are still have not been dispersed. A large amount of that money has still been held back. But this is 1/4 of the volume of money printing that was done to bail out the financial system beginning in the fourth quarter of 2019. That is, it's estimated that somewhere over $23 trillion has gone into the black hole of the speculative bubble, which is 4 times larger than the stimulus payments. Now, some of the stimulus payments maintained a certain amount of consumer spending. There was $1 trillion that went to small businesses. But it is true that this money did not go into the real economy, into the physical economy. Consumer spending is related to the real economy, but it's not the real economy. You're buying goods in many cases that are produced in other countries. So the question is, when will there be credit generated into the real economy in the United States and Western Europe? And where did the $23 trillion go? Well, this went to cover the bad debts based on the bad bets made by speculators. It's the accumulated debt cost of the financial instruments that have been released in order to juggle the problems of corporate debt, public sector debt, and private debt. And it's the speculators who are demanding more. They never have enough because each time they borrow the banks loan money to the debtors to cover their existing debts, it increases the debt of those debtors and therefore the unsustainable debt on the books of the banks. Now, we're seeing this have an incredible effect in Europe, where we're going deeper into the crisis. Take the United Kingdom as an example. The government is borrowing huge amounts of money, up to almost 400 billion pounds, to bail out energy companies. But the energy costs are up. Why are the energy companies in trouble? Because of their derivative contracts, because of their trading operations. It's not to provide energy, but to cover the cost of their financing. And this is made worse by the Green New Deal, as well as the role of spot markets, which are completely unregulated and who jack up prices to whatever can be paid, which means if it can't be paid, then these companies will go to the government to borrow money to cover their costs. Now, there's a headline in the Asia Times over the weekend: global margin call hits European debt markets. And it opens by saying, hedges blew up after risk gauges in Germany's government debt market exceeded those of the 2008 world crash. In other words, the cost of insuring outstanding debt is going higher and higher because of the lack of ability to pay it, to the point that it's much larger than what happened when the world blew up in 2008. Now, and to deal with this, the City of London banks, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank are all calling on the Fed, the US Federal Reserve, to do more quantitative easing to bail out the derivative markets. The derivative markets are a threat to the whole global economy. Instead of bailing them out, they should be shut down, and the people holding positions in them should be forced to eat their losses. And the credit that is being generated to go into covering derivative trading, that credit should be going into the real economy. Now, the other aspect of the story behind this is the continued insanity of the Warhawks. We saw it very big this weekend, the chatter going around about Putin's threats to use nuclear weapons, tactical nukes against Ukraine, and so on. Putin has not threatened to use nuclear weapons. He said the same thing that the US government says, which is if the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Russia is at stake, then they will use any and all capability to protect it. That's in the United States security doctrine. That's not a threat to use those weapons. It's a defensive posture. And to argue that Putin is preparing nuclear weapons, that's being used by the real nuts, like the Atlantic Council commentators, who are saying, or like Zelensky, who are saying that a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia should be done to stop Russia from using nuclear weapons. This makes the scenes from Dr. Strangelove seem more real. I mean, the idea that you stop a nuclear war by starting one is the same kind of insanity we see overall. For example, the gloating over the explosion of the North Sea pipeline, Blinken saying this is a great opportunity for the United States. So terrorist attacks on critical infrastructure is a great opportunity for the United States. And who did it? Who made that opportunity? When you hear language like that, you can see why the Russians do feel threatened. And you should feel threatened by it too, because it's crazy that this kind of language is out there. Now we're seeing chortling over the Russian bridge to connect to Crimea that was hit by a probable terrorist attack by Ukraine over the weekend. Again, cheerleading acts of terrorism against critical infrastructure. And at the same time, pretending that the shelling going on against the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is being done by the Russians when they control the plant and it's their troops that are inside it. This is where we see the West, the leadership of the West, has lost its collective mind. Now, in this context, there was appears to be terrorist sabotage in northern Germany this last weekend. The railroad traffic through most of northern Germany, connecting Hamburg and Berlin primarily, was shut down when some cables were cut. This kind of thing is not completely unheard of. It's been done in the past by green terrorists. But the question of why would leftist terrorists be doing that now when the Green Party is in power in the German government? And the Nord Stream pipeline explosion affected Germany more than anyone else. It's clear that Germany is under attack, but so far the German politicians are too frightened by these actions to speak out and defend their own nation. Now, without a move from the West to a new Bretton Woods system, to a new financial and security architecture, the situation will only get worse. Now, while we cover the worsening of the situation, go to our websites to get the solutions. Study what we mean by a new Bretton Woods. Credit for physical production, new platforms of infrastructure, frontier science exploration, and national credit banks to build up industry that's been torn down by green crazies and outsourcing. That's the way we have to go. And if you want to do that, join with us to fight for those policies. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you again tomorrow.